Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, your home for heavy strategy, awesome theme, and everything in between. Check us out along with other great podcasts at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 115. Should I Buy It? Part 1, Heroes of Terrinoth. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to the Every Night is Game Night podcast. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are here at the end of the year. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to all of the people who are out there celebrating. And because we're board gamers, we are buying. Depending on the states of your wallet, this is the time of year where it is time to put up or shut up. Are we going to take the plunge on some of these awesome games that we've been checking out this entire year? The last couple of episodes has been top 100 solo games, that list over on BGG that Kevin Erskine puts together. That's about as good a representative sample of the games that we enjoy on this podcast in terms of, and games we recommend in terms of gifts to give to people, like, you know, kind of best in show. The next 3 episodes are going to be kind of in that spirit of helping you figure out where to lay down your hard-earned cash. We have selected 3 games, or I've selected 3 games that are super hot in the Soloverse and, you know, in the kind of adventure gaming sphere. So, you know, I've been all over those games. So this is Heroes of Terrinoth, Chronicles of Crime, and Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. So these 3 games are games that are popular and they promise more and more content. So if you buy into them, you're probably going to be in for a little bit more than just the base experience. So what I wanted to do was take the next 3 episodes and put them together under the rubric of Should I Buy It? We are going to get down, deep and dirty, deep dive style with an eye towards giving you that full 360-degree experience. Lots of plays, lots of expertise. I have invited a couple of people who are going to help me out in terms of co-hosting to discuss each 3 games, you know, kind of really get into the meat of it and figure out if these games are a worthy addition to your collection. The first will be Heroes of Terrinoth, and that's what we're going to get to as soon as we kick off the episode proper. A couple of items of business before we get the show started properly. First, we are going to be at PAX Unplugged as the episode drops, right around when the episode drops, that weekend for sure. So Anthony, Liz, and I will be hanging out, playing games, interacting with the community. I will be helping out the Dice Tower booth. Maybe I might even pop by the Asmati Games booth because to help out there, because 1001 Odysseys is one of my truly looked forward to games. Hopefully have some coverage of that one soon. Liz is going to be at the Weird Giraffes booth, demoing games for Weird Giraffe, Carla Kopp over there. Anthony's going to be floating around. He's old hat at this. He doesn't teach at all. He's been going to these things for years and years. Liz and I are a little bit newer. So, but all of us are going to be around. We would definitely look forward to chatting. You know, just, you know, if you see us, stop by, say hi. You know, we'll take some selfies. Maybe even, you know, if you have time, play a game together or something like that. All right, so that is our public service announcement about going to PAX. The second item of business is the one we get to every single week here on Every Night is Game Night. We are going to get to the Kickstarter project of the week in our In Liz We Trust segment. Liz, I'm going to throw it over to you to share about another good Kickstarter project.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. This week, I want to talk about Rallyman GT. Rallyman has been a staple for a large contingent of solo gamers for years, despite it being out of print. It's a roll-and-move racing game with regular BGG challenges based on it, and it only dropped from the People's Choice Top 100 solo games this year after several years on the list, even though it was out of print. But now, Rallyman is back, with brand new art and fine-tuned rules. Is Rallyman ready to reclaim its place as the premier racing game for solo players? If you want to learn more, you should absolutely check out the preview on Board Gamers Anonymous, written by our very own Anthony. And act fast, because the campaign ends on December 6th. Happy gaming!
So sometimes we introduce Liz and she has news of a game that doesn't kind of quite jibe thematically with what we're talking about. So let's say it's one of Anthony's Euro episodes and Liz shows us like a 15-minute card game that's on Kickstarter. I have a feeling that the Kickstarter that Liz talks about this week is going to jive pretty well. Cause like I said, us solo gamers love our adventure games. So thank you very much, Liz, for getting us some knowledge about that. Okay. Now we are ready to get into our Should I Buy This deep dive of Heroes of Terrinoth, answering every single question that you might have as a consumer to see if this game is right for you. So I wanted to reach out and find someone who really, really seemed like they knew about this engine, about this game. So I went to BGG and I looked down the reviews and I found one that was very, very thorough, very smart. And I just reached out, I contacted this person. They were good enough to join. In fact, I think I put out this call yesterday, and today here we are at a podcast, which is an amazing thing. So I am pleased to have, for his podcast debut, his name is Jay Imbrenda. He is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he wrote an awesome article about Heroes of Terrinoth and BGG. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Appreciate the kind introduction, and I'm really happy to be on.
All right. So before we get started, again, Heroes of Terrinoth, deep dive, answering critical questions. Should I buy this? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, because you are a debuting guest. Maybe tell us about, kind of your gaming background, some of the games that you like, and how, kind of Heroes of Terrinoth maybe fits in all that.
Sure. So I'm a professor of literacy, and most of my work involves designing instruction for high school classrooms. And so game design became a real source of inspiration for me some years ago. And I started to think a lot about the principles that sort of underlie the design of a good game, and how, those principles can be transported into really good learning experiences. So games have become kind of a source of, for a long time they were a source of recreation for me, but they've become more of a source of fascination for me in recent years. And it's been auspicious because, the board gaming industry has had such creative momentum behind it the past few years. So I've become really enamored with the ingenious designs of what you can do with cardboard and cards and components, especially when it comes to like cooperative and solo games. So yeah, I guess I spend a lot of time playing games and a lot of time thinking about them.
Nice. And speaking of co-op and solo, I found out when I reached out to you that you're a listener. I'm floored. I'm always shocked when because, we have a decent sized listenership. We're on a Dice Tower and all that kind of stuff. But we're not huge. So we're definitely not huge. So it's always a big surprise when, you reach out to a stranger and it turns out they've listened to your show. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your perspectives on this stuff, especially in the context of like you being a professor, and, you're going to way outshine me when it comes to this analysis stuff.
Well, I wouldn't give it too much credit. I'm in education. We're always struggling to keep up with the world.
That is definitely true in the academic world. Okay, so let us get into it. It is Heroes of Terrinoth. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro, and we will answer some critical questions kind of one at a time. Okay, so let's get into some basic description. So Heroes of Terrinoth is a reiteration of Warhammer Quest adventure card game from 2015. That was, I think, the first co-design by Adam and Brady Sadler. They've been on the show multiple times, so friends of the show should know who they are. If you don't, they're a design team. They designed a lot of games together. They worked for Fantasy Flight. They worked in the Descent system, so they're very, kind of versed in this stuff. And this was their first co-design in 2015. They have reiterated the same system, the same, kind of motifs and everything, for Heroes of Terrinoth. So this is an adventure card game. Adventure card games, basically a situation where you're usually playing a hero and you're usually fighting monsters, but they play out, over a series of decks of cards, rather than with like board and minis and the way we usually think of adventure games. So you're looking at, you're going to fight a wave of enemies. That comes out of a deck of cards. You fight a boss. The boss is a card. You're going to explore locations. The location is usually a deck of cards. the heroes in many of these games can be a deck of cards too, but in this particular game, and we'll get into like the details of it. I'm just as a super overview, details later. But for right now, just know that in this game, your hero is basically 4 cards, and they have actions on them, and the actions kind of behave a certain way depending on what you're trying to do. And you have a mission, and the missions play out differently depending on what the rule says. So, like, sometimes you have to beat a lot of monsters. Sometimes you have to race to escape. And, the game's going to present all sorts of challenges and mechanisms to get you going in that way. So that's basically the context of what Heroes of Terrinoth is doing. You probably already knew that. But what you might not know is what's the difference? Why did they re-implement this system? What is this add over Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game? Why not just go buy that old thing? They're not compatible, so don't try to think that they can cross. But if you own that old system, is it worth investing into the new system? And what does this new system add? So you've played Warhammer Quest, is that correct, Jay?
I have.
Okay, so maybe just if you have a couple of like thoughts, just kind of off the top of your head, what would you say is the comparison between Warhammer Quest and Heroes of Terrinoth?
Well, first and foremost is the theme, and that may not be a major factor for some people, but some people are also very sort of passionate about the Warhammer universe. And while the Terrinoth universe, which is Fantasy Flight's sort of generic fantasy setting for a lot of their games, probably doesn't have as strong, I think, a sort of allure to some people.
Although what I will say, I know what you're saying, and a lot of people think it's true, but I was listening to Travis over at low player count. There you go. There's so many low player stuff. Travis loves Terrinoth. He's like, oh, I get to see these goblins and these war chiefs. It's like, really? So some people apparently attached to the Terrinoth universe. Who knew?
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure. And there's so many games, that a lot of people probably have a long history with it. But, then I've probably encountered more people who will gravitate towards something just because it has Warhammer on it and, not even pay attention necessarily to what the product is. So that's one difference. The other difference, some other differences of note are that Heroes of Terrinoth is one-off quest-based, whereas Warhammer, very notably had a campaign. So, it was meant to be played, this quest in succession with certain kinds of progress that you would carry forward, and Heroes of Terrinoth doesn't have that.
Well, let's pause there. Let's pause there because that's a huge thing, right? Where solo gamers, you're a solo gamer too, right?
Oh, I am, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we love adventures. We love campaigns. Like so many of the top 100 solo games are campaign games or games with some sort of progression to them. Even like a deck builder is like in its own way, like kind of an encapsulated sense of progression. So this game has standalone missions and it has 8. And as opposed to 5, so you get a little bit more there. The heroes, you get, a little bit more variety in the heroes. Like you have 4 basic classes, but in Warhammer, they only had 1 version of each class. And this one, you have like a couple of versions you could choose from. So there's more variety just kind of in that granular level, but there's no campaign. So was that a big deal for you as a solo gamer to look like, oh, I can't progress a character and max them out and explore stuff?
It wasn't. And I think people will be divided on this, but I actually found that the campaign aspect of Warhammer was not that strong to begin with in terms of like feeling like a real overall progression. And when I finished a campaign in Warhammer, and I think a lot of people probably felt this way too, I didn't really feel that inclined to play it again. The one thing that Warhammer did offer that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is this really interesting delve mode. And it was kind of like an additional scenario outside the campaign. But what it was a way to procedurally play through basically all the content in the game box in one setting. And I thought that was really interesting. And those delve quests could become kind of really crazy and unexpected in a lot of ways. And so the delve mode to me was the real draw for Warhammer once I got through the campaign. So the one-off nature of Heroes of Terrinoth doesn't bother me, and I actually felt like they did a really nice job in making the quests feel different, just by toying with some, a few sort of core elements. Like for example, I don't want to be too spoilery, but, there's one quest where you're just in one location the whole time. And, just that one change really changes some of the fundamentals of it because, the explore action takes on a different nature. And so I feel like there's really enough difference across the 8 quests that it sells the strengths of that structure.
Mm-hmm. So Brady Sadler is a very cool guy. Adam Sadler is very cool too. I don't know, for whatever reason. I think I contacted Brady first, so I'm kind of used to talking to him. And you guys can do it too. Like, he's on Facebook and he comments on everything. he's always there. So like, you can actually hit Brady up if you have a question or, put in a thread or something like that. He will respond. But I was asking him, like, why doesn't this have a campaign mode? And he actually said exactly that. A lot of people approached Warhammer Quest and they finished the campaign and they didn't go back to it. They went on Reddit or they went on BGG and complained about, give me more content. Because what happens is you go through the 5 and you max out your character and there's no other way to go. Like, it was a very limited resource for character progression. You had your, a basic set of items, a basic set of character kind of card improvements, and you couldn't like do it again and get a different result. So there was no real way to, people didn't feel that urge to go back either to play the campaign again or to play the individual missions again. So what they decided to do here was to kind of take down that campaign expectation and make it more about this kind of like incremental progression in the missions. And then you could replay the missions and build your character a different way or play a different character, adding to the replayability and the accessibility. I didn't think of it that way. I love campaigns. I just love campaigns. And it's like, if the campaign is unsatisfying, then just give me more campaign. But they didn't go that way. They actually went the exact opposite way. And I guess from your perspective, it seemed like it worked.
It did, because the game is, and this is kind of a drawback too, but the game is so overtly mechanical that it doesn't work as well with a campaign structure because your character doesn't grow organically. I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense, but
so we'll actually we'll put a pin in that. I definitely, because you mentioned that in your review. It'll make sense when we kind of talk a little bit more about the different game elements, about the mechanical nature of the game. So we can get to that.
Okay.
Because I'll actually go in the order that you went into. I thought you did a good job of organizing your thoughts in like a very coherent way in your written review. So the first thing you talked about was the heroes. So let's talk a little bit about how the actual heroes play, because I think that is the main draw of this system. That is what this system does best. So like, question number 1, is this different than Warhammer Quest? Mechanically, no, but it just changes it enough of the way it like not having a campaign and just having more variety of missions are like, that's different. That's if that's enough of a difference for you, then go for it. That's question number 1. Number 2, do I feel awesome as a hero? And I think the answer is yes. So maybe you could talk a little bit about like how the heroes work and what about the heroes worked for you.
Well, there's 4 different classes, and then within those 4 different classes, you have 3 different options for the heroes. And you're only ever going to have one of each class. So you're not going to have 2 scouts or 2 warriors. And I would say that the differences across those classes and those heroes, the word that rules the day is subtlety. That these are not vastly different characters, and that's really embedded in the nature of the action system itself. So each class has a standout strength, like if you're a scout, you have a real advantage with exploring. And if you're a mage, then, you have, by default, you have a ranged attack available and you can target multiple enemies. And, if you're the healer class, then you can restore health to your allies, which, no other class has a way to do that. So each class does have sort of one aspect of them that stands out. But beyond that, the differences are actually really subtle. And one of the things that we found when we first sat down and started playing was that, if you're a warrior and you have, your upgraded attack action, you're actually not really that stronger at attacking than, the healer is with an updated attack action, because you're still rolling the same number of dice. Mm-hmm. And as far as the differences of the different characters within each class, those are very subtle differences too, to the point where, there were a couple where we were kind of forgetting that they even had this ability a lot, like a small ability like, if you didn't spend a success token, gain a success token. And, I couldn't even count the number of times across a couple of play sessions where we just forgot to activate those abilities a lot. So on one hand, seeing 12 different characters across 4 classes really does seem like a lot of variety, and it is, but it's not a pronounced difference in terms of how you sort of experience it. It's not, to compare to any number of other games that have different characters like Gloomhaven or Too Many Bones or, games like that where different characters really means you better bring a different mindset to this game. Yeah, it's really not like that.
Yeah, the difference isn't in what the characters do; it's how the characters play. So, like the way it works, like you have 4 actions: your attack, explore, aid, and rest. Aid is like give other people success tokens. Rest is how you get hit points back. Very simple stuff, right? When you use an action, you have to tap it. And I'm gonna say tapping, darn it! I'm gonna crusade about this. It's exhaust, and you can't say tapping because it's magic. But no, you turn the card sideways for Christ's sake, and so you can't use it until you recover it. So you might just attack and then do something to untap it and just kind of cycle your attack that way. That's not a very effective way to do it. You want to use your explore, use your aid, like use the different things. In Warhammer, there's always a card that lets you like untap everything. In Warhammer, there was distributed. So like, some people did that with the attack action. Some people did that with the, explore action. In this game, I think it's all off the rest action, which is your basic like health recovery. I like that a little bit better because it's made it a little bit cleaner. People are going to have different, ideas about that. But what that does is, speaking to your subtlety point, like you can't just go in there and spam your attacks. Like I think of a game like Sword and Sorcery, where you can really just roll your attack every single turn. Or Too Many Bones, like if you really wanted to, you could buff your basic attack and just like spam your basic dice all the time. Like you cannot attack all the time. So you have to coordinate. Like, okay, I'm going to attack this turn. I'm not going to have my attack next turn. I know this guy is going to come out. So I need you to have your attack available. And there's a coordination that happens that, even if you can't play with this with one, you have to play with at least 2. And this is where the game really shines, is that coordination between actors and in the way that Jay was talking about, where you have to like really plan out, like, okay, who's going to use their attack? Who's going to use their aid? Okay, I'm about to get hit. The warrior's like, okay, I'm going to save you and I'm going to yank this character over here. You really have to like be verbal about that. I'm reminded of a game, we reviewed it, but we review a lot of games. Perdition's Mouth, Abyssal Rift, where you can't spam your attack in that game either. You have this like rondel system of attacks, and you have to really coordinate, okay, who does what when. It's like a dance. Like, is that like a way of describing how that felt? Is like more of like a dance type thing as opposed to just a spam fest?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The level of coordination that the game asks of players is really, really, really high. And if you have somebody who's kind of going rogue over on the side and not paying attention or not cooperating, then that's gonna, you're not gonna win the quest, because you need to really think through the whole round before you even start taking any turns. And right. And even the rest action, as you were saying, is really fundamentally different than it was in Warhammer in a lot of ways. And it's actually a lot more tactically viable, not just because it refreshes your actions and heals you, but, every class's rest action also has some, ancillary effect. And those ancillary effects can add a new layer of tactics. So, we found that once we started to get a little bit better at the game, we were using the rest action tactically, not just because, all my cards are exhausted, I have to refresh them now. And it really was a matter of thinking about, who's going to rest this round too, who gets a turn to rest and can do something useful while they're at it with that too. And, all throughout, there's a lot of communication, a lot of coordination. And if you get lazy, then you will go down.
So we're both D&D players of the old school. What is the most boring thing you can do in your turn in D&D? Cure light wounds. There you go. Have some help. When healing is tactical, you know the game is tactical.
I always played the cleric, and
so did I.
And everyone was always glad to have me around.
I was very happy when I could do something else besides cure light wounds. They're like, you memorized other spells? What are you doing?
Yeah. But whenever I was in danger, they were rushing to help me. Like, oh God, don't let him die.
Oh, yeah. So one part you were critical when it came to the hero side was the system of dice resolution. So when you attack, you're going to be rolling some dice, and the dice are six-sided and very simple. Like, you're either going to hit, or you're going to block an incoming hit, or there's exploding dice, like you can kind of roll again. You were pretty critical of that. Do you want to maybe talk about why?
Yeah. So I'll try my best not to go too into overarching game theory, but like dice have really become an interesting thing, because on one hand, like everybody who plays games love dice, and we don't want to see dice go away, but we're also just sort of not willing to deal with superficial dice mechanics. We don't have the resilience for that the way we used to. And I like the idea of exploding dice. They're super fun. But the problem in Heroes of Terrinoth is that half of the time when you explode the dice, you get all these extra successes, and they're not useful in any way. So if you get extra successes in an attack action, for example, they're only useful if you're one of the few characters that can target multiple enemies. If you can only target one enemy, and that enemy has 4 health, and you just got 8 successes, guess what? You just wasted those extra successes.
Well, you beat the high score.
Yeah, and that's about it, and 8 actions are always sort of hard capped at 5 successes, because that's the most success tokens someone can have. Rest actions, if you're seriously wounded and you get a great roll in a rest action, but I mean, that's like cure light wounds right there, wow, whoop-de-doo, I just healed myself a whole lot, so like the dramatic effect of the exploding dice was not really that present for us. And it just seemed to me that the critical successes were a missed opportunity to allow actions to have different effects that would help to not only introduce some more some drama and some sort of thematic unpredictability to the game, but also to really further differentiate the characters and the upgrade paths, because they don't feel a lot, as different as you kind of want them to feel. And, if I upgrade my warrior to a berserker and he has now a unique critical effect, that's just another way to make that character class feel really distinct.
So I actually slightly disagree with you here, only in the sense that I don't mind excess. I don't see that as a bad thing. So like if you follow baseball and someone hits a 450-foot home run, like you're not going to say, oh, but he could have hit that 330 feet and still hit it out. Like if someone hits like a huge, massive thing, like you hit the high score, that's actually like fun in a thematic way. It's like, you can imagine you didn't just kill the person, you overkilled the person. And it's not like it takes away from other things. It's not like you did 8 damage here and that means you only can do 3 damage the next time. Maybe that happens that way, but that's the exploding dice is always like a bonus, and I can see it having like a thematic kind of yay, and that's what dice games are for. They're for that pop. They're for that excitement. So I didn't quite mind that. However, having said that, reflecting on like how dice are being used, like in Too Many Bones or these other like very few games have 3 options on the dice anymore. They usually have more. And they find ways to kind of put more in that, even a D6. So I get your point, but I guess just let me have my exploding dice, please.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I really like exploding dice. I just don't. I don't remember us having too many moments, and we really marathon played this game because, there was a lot of interest around it, and there were no reviews, and so I wanted to just kind of get a review out. And I won't review a game unless I feel like I've spent a good amount of time with it. And so we really marathon played, and there weren't that many moments where we had exploding dice and we took out that really made the difference because the dice exploded there. It just never seemed to happen when we wanted it to.
Right. I guess I guess you're right about that. Okay, so let's go on to. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time about it, but like, because we're talking around like how the monsters and the quests work. I mean, because we're starting to get into a little bit of a critical area here, especially with the monsters. So you can handle monsters different ways in different games. Like you can even have like big boss battles. You can have like little annoyance enemies. You can have different tactical stuff. Like in this game, the monsters are basically the only thing you have to deal with, and there's a lot of them. Like, in a lot of the scenarios as you go on, you even start with like, everybody starts with 2 monsters in front of them, and there's 2 areas a monster can be in front of you and the shadows. So like, 2 monsters in front of them or 2 monsters in the shadows, and you just like swarm with monsters from the very, very beginning. And it's very rare that you're going to get ahead until you get like an advanced card or until you get some sort of effect that wipes things out. So, or like your mage just explodes everything, really. It's like, I explode everything in the shadows.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm amazing. So if you're not playing the mage, then that might not happen so much. So what you were saying is that the monsters, when the monsters are there's so many of them, it becomes more of a battle of attrition rather than this like tactical thing where it's like, you can't get ahead. It's not like you can ever clean the thing up because, once the deck runs out, you just, turn the deck over and open the Pez dispenser of monsters again, think of again. And it didn't feel like an adventure. It felt like suffocating. That's my word, not yours. But is that kind of how you felt playing the game?
Yeah. The design of the game tends toward bringing more enemies out rather than making you think smartly about how to deal with the enemies that are out. And I will preface this by saying I really, really like the keyword system on the enemy cards. I think it's really clever, and like some of the ways that the keywords will interact across multiple different types of enemies can be really cool. And I kind of wanted to have to think more about how to deal with that. But instead, the game's answer is really to just keep the pressure on you by bringing more and more enemies out. And there aren't very many enemies in the whole game that are individually really dangerous. So danger is really always a matter of numbers. Even the big baddie nemesis enemies, for the most part, are just bigger health pools that you have to deal with. They're not individually that much more threatening. And the ultimate effect of it was this, when we were finally able to win, we felt, satisfied that we had made good decisions and that helped us to win. But every time we lost, we had simply felt like we'd been overrun. And and I guess that's kind of a throwback feeling for me. That's a feeling of older, like, really earlier generation cooperative games where we were still kind of figuring out how you could make cooperative games, especially like cooperative fantasy games. And so, the tendency was to create these sort of like survival scenarios where enemies are just going to keep coming and you have to survive. But nowadays, I'm not as compelled by that. I would not say it's a major problem with this game in any way. I think that the mechanics of the game are designed for that. And so they're really, it sort of fits with the, that dancing rhythm that you were talking about. But at the same time, I wouldn't have minded an occasional opportunity to have to outwit, a very dangerous enemy rather than just, now let's deal with 4 more enemies that just came out.
Mm-hmm. Or like I'll read a scenario, like why is Gloomhaven popular? Gloomhaven is popular because the tactics are fun, and it's like you don't get overwhelmed with Gloomhaven. I think there's some scenarios where there's monsters generate, but for the most part you're walking into a place, the monsters are there, and they have behaviors that are determined by the deck, but they're not overwhelming you. Like you have to kind of guess where the monster's going and anticipate what they're going to do and draw them out and blah, blah, blah. Like you're not really drawing anything out. There's only 2 places monsters can be. And if they're in the shadows, you're kind of in trouble, So you have to pull them in front of you. So there's not a lot of tactical room over there. Do you need that? But I guess in terms of giving people heads up on what they're buying into and how this is different from other games, that's very important to point out that this game really is, a monster dispenser. I mean, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah.
And I guess so this comes to my biggest criticism of this game. So it's all fighting. So if you turn over there's bigger mission cards, and if you turn them over and without reading the peril track stuff and all that, you get a story setting up what you're doing. And the story is this like 3-paragraph thing that's like, you're captured and then you fool the guard into letting you out. You sneak down the hallways. You overhear the Baron talking about his evil plans. There's a secret tunnel. You escape. And then once you're at the exit, your guards see you and you engage. Fight. So that is a lot of cool stuff. I would like to have played that cool stuff. And we're both D&D players. In D&D, you play that stuff. And even in other adventure card games. So I'm thinking like the Aventuria adventure card game. I'm thinking of Grimslingers, which is not a popular game, but it's actually still my favorite adventure card game because the story is cool and because it has different differentiated skills and different, ways of engaging different kinds of encounters. Adventure isn't only fighting, it's all this other stuff. It's exploration. Like exploration in this game is kind of nothing. I think you make this point as well. Like the exploration deck is just a kind of a missed opportunity. Usually you're exploring like 3 rooms max and they're not that different. know, you go to the forest, you go to the tomb, you go to the lair, and it's like this, it's a slightly different meta rule, but not really that different. It's all fighting, if this is a movie, it skips you straight to the last 5-minute combat, climax of that movie. I would enjoy that better if the game had room to give me that first stuff to build up towards that manic fighting part. So I maybe it's just asking too much of the system for that. But like if I'm getting into an adventure, and this is an adventure card game, a cooperative card game of questing and adventure. Lies. This is a cooperative card game of fighting. So, I mean, and I'm looking, I just read that right off the box. So that was my difficulty with it. Maybe that's more of an expectation created by the art and created by what it's called, but that's what it is. Is that something that you resonated with, or were you okay with the combat? Actually, I mean, maybe you weren't as okay with the fighting because you mentioned before, like there's more of an efficiency engine as opposed to a real adventure. But are we kind of on the same page here?
Oh yeah. I mean, that really would sum up the game for me. Is that it's a really, really tightly made efficiency engine, and it's best in class when it comes to that. But when it comes to fantasy adventure, like you said, it's not really quite that. And so the text the writing is fantastic, and there is 1 or 2 quests where you see the special card in the adventure deck. So, or in the exploration deck. So, I mean, that's something that could definitely be used more to just, now we've explored it. We turned over this card. Here's a little more narrative. Here's some more story to this, and maybe some kinds of objectives that, like you say, aren't just about eliminating enemies.
Mm-hmm. I wonder so obviously, the part of the question of should I buy this, and as we kind of come to close to the end, where is this game going to go expansion wise? One thing we didn't mention is that the game doesn't have items, doesn't have fat loots, like, the sword of this and the shield of that. That is probably coming. And it doesn't have a campaign mode. That's probably coming. All the stuff that's missing is probably coming, Is this game going to have more adventure in it? That part I'm a little bit more skeptical of. The characters are cool. They act really cool. The system of tapping stuff is really cool, but they have no alternative stats. Like, they're not going to be able to search. Well, they have explore, but they're not going to be able to like dodge and sneak and da-da-da-da. There's no stats for that. It's if they're going to explore, it's going to be to move to the next room and fight more monsters, that kind of thing. So, again, really solid mechanical system, really fun in terms of people who really want to just explore fighting, explore cooperation. This is probably the most cooperative of all the cooperative adventure games. Like Pathfinder is basically multiplayer solitaire. So I definitely enjoy this better than that. On the whole, I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I think, the theme of the episode is should I buy this? And I would rate this game very high for value. because it's at probably about the lowest price point you can expect for a premium game nowadays, and you get really good value out of the box for it. And there is definitely the promise, or at least the hope, that it will continue to be supported. Being a Fantasy Flight IP and all. So
although I should mention, in terms of like the value, some of that value comes from the fact that there's a lot of recycled art assets. I think people got a little bit upset at that. It's like, come on, Fantasy Flight, come on.
Yeah, and I'm the worst person because I have like no aesthetic sensibilities at all. Like if someone can draw a stick figure, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So it did not bother me at all. I actually enjoyed seeing a couple of familiar characters from Runebound, because I really like Runebound, and I thought it was pretty cool to see some of the same characters come back.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right. I think we have covered all of people's questions, and I think we've covered most of the issues that you had in your review. Was there anything in that review that you feel like we should be talking about now, in terms of giving people a full sense of what they're buying?
No, I think we covered it pretty well, and I really appreciate that. That you found it helpful, and that you've really felt like it was worth talking about more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just laid out everything. I mean, again, at the end of the day, I don't, should you buy this? We're not going to answer that. Like, we're trying to give you the tools so you can answer that yourselves. It is very different than Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game. It's better in pretty much every way except for the lack of campaign. So if campaign's something that's really, really important to you, then maybe you want to hold off until they release an expansion that adds a little bit of a campaign sense to it. If you're a person that loves that sense of story and adventure, you might not get that here. What you're buying here is a pretty rich combat system that has a lot of potential. I think right now the combat looks a little bit, samey because of the waves of monsters and everything, but there's a lot of room for change. The missions are different. It's not always just like a race to the end. Some you beat a lot of monsters, some you explore a lot. So I think there's room for variability there. I think, so for the most part, if it ticks those boxes, this might be a really worthwhile purchase for you. So so thank you so much for joining me on this little ride. This has been Heroes of Terrinoth. Should I buy this? The deep dive episode. Jay, are you active on the social medias, or should we just follow your reviews on BGG?
Yeah, I'm not real active, no, but I try to review games periodically, but I'm always behind. I don't always get the newest games, and so I'm not always real fast with like reviewing the newest games, but I do try to write reviews that are of the kind of reviews that I like, which are like lots of big wall of text and a lot of analysis, and, the kind of reviews that help me make decisions. So I'll try to stay on that, but
you use subheadings, though. Thank you very much for using subheadings. You can write as much as you want. Just split it up for me. Split the bread.
I'm in the social sciences, so, we live and die by subheadings.
I'm so appreciative of that. It's a very well-written review. Thank you so much. I hope that this episode was, like you said before, something that people find really useful in terms of seeing if they wanted to make the jump in. I have it sitting right here. I'm looking forward to more content. So, that kind of says everything for itself. We both had, spent a lot of time with this game and wanted to organize our thoughts in that way. So thank you very much, Jay. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Merry Christmas.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Jason. Merry Christmas to you as well.
All right. So that was it for the episode. If you want to hit us up, talk about Heroes of Terrinoth, talk about some other games that you're thinking about in terms of like purchase, an initial purchase into what might be a longer set of purchases. Heroes of Terrinoth is going to definitely get expansions. It's Fantasy Flight, for crying out loud. So of course it's going to get expansions. Hopefully the popularity merits it, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to talk about any particular games, Hit us up, ENGN _podcast on the Twitter, Every Night's Game Night Facebook group, everynightsgamenight.com is our website. I'm eminently available. I try to make myself available. I know I got the screaming kid. He's screaming up there as I'm speaking. But, I'm trying to get back into the groove of this whole reviewing thing. We're going to review a couple of more games coming forward, and then we're going to get into our coverage of PAX. So I will be attending PAX. If you see me walking around, I'll be at the Dice Tower booth. I'll be floating around. So if you wanted to just hit me up, I'll be around and playing games. So that's going to be the episode. As Anthony would say, go ahead and grab a game off of that shelf and let's make every night a game night.